The shocking truth about fixing love crises, what no one told you before. Part 1. Hello. When love begins to shake, when a relationship that once felt stable suddenly becomes fragile, most women instinctively search for quick fixes, emotional reassurances, or a magical sentence that will bring peace back into the couple. But emotional crises in romantic relationships are deeper than words, deeper than apologies, and deeper than the symptoms you can see. To manage a love crisis effectively, you first need to understand the anatomy of a crisis, the emotional triggers behind it, and the hidden patterns that lead two people who care about each other to conflict, distance, or pain. The truth is that a crisis is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that something within you, within him, or within the dynamics between you both requires transformation. The first essential step is understanding that a romantic crisis rarely comes from the event that seems to cause it. A crisis unfolds because of accumulated emotional tension that has been ignited by a trigger. Women often ask why their partner reacts so strongly to something that feels minor, but the explanation is simple. The crisis existed before the argument, like a fire waiting for a spark. When you understand that a crisis is the expression of unmet needs, unspoken fears, and emotional disconnection, you begin to approach it differently. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding wisely. Many women try to resolve a crisis by talking for hours, explaining their point of view, or pressuring their partner to clarify his feelings. But during a crisis, the male emotional system works differently. When men feel overwhelmed, criticized, or powerless, they shut down. A crisis intensifies this shutdown. So, the more you push, the more he retreats. One of the most powerful tools available to you is emotional pacing, knowing when to speak, when to pause, and when to step back. Silence is not a weapon, it is sometimes the safest container for emotions that are too intense to be handled verbally. Another foundational principle is emotional self-regulation. Before attempting to manage the crisis with him, you must manage your internal crisis. Women often take immediate action when they feel fear of loss. But fear-driven actions rarely lead to constructive outcomes. Emotional self-regulation means understanding what you feel, naming your emotions, and giving yourself space to calm down. It does not mean suppressing your emotions, it means mastering the ability to respond rather than react. Ask yourself, am I speaking from fear, anger, abandonment wounds, or from clarity and intention? Once you stabilize your inner space, you can begin to understand his emotional landscape. Men in crisis often feel misunderstood, inadequate, or pressured. They may also fear disappointing you or failing in the relationship. These fears turn into withdrawal. If you treat his withdrawal as rejection, you amplify the crisis. If you treat it as a sign of emotional overload, you begin to create the psychological safety necessary for reconnection. Psychological safety is built through calm presence, non-accusatory communication, and a willingness to validate emotions without agreeing to every behavior. Validation is not saying that he is right, it is acknowledging that his feelings are real. Acknowledgement opens doors, while defensiveness closes them. When you say something like "I hear that you feel overwhelmed, and I want to understand you," you neutralize the crisis energy. Instead of fighting, you begin to collaborate emotionally. This transforms confrontation into cooperation. Reframing the crisis is the next important step. Women often believe that the crisis is an emergency requiring immediate resolution. But most crises do not require instant solutions, they require emotional decompression. When you stop trying to solve everything instantly, you create space for deeper understanding. The biggest mistake women make is demanding clarity from a partner who is emotionally confused. Give him time to process. Men process emotions more slowly and often internally. If you rush this process, you create more confusion. Communication during a crisis must follow 3 pillars: clarity, brevity, and emotional neutrality. Long explanations overwhelm him. Accusations trigger defensiveness. Emotional overflow triggers shutdown. You must communicate in a grounded, simple, and calm way. Say what you feel without blaming. Say what you need without pressuring. Say what you observe without judging. For example, when we argue like this, I feel disconnected. I want us to find a better way. Can we take a moment and talk calmly later? This kind of communication shows emotional maturity and gives him space to participate without feeling attacked. Boundaries are also essential. Many women confuse boundaries with ultimatums. A boundary is not a threat, it is a declaration of self-respect. If the crisis includes disrespect, emotional neglect, or destructive communication patterns, you must calmly set boundaries. For example, I'm willing to talk about this, but not while we are yelling. Let us pause and return to the conversation when we are calmer. This shows that you refuse chaos but remain open to connection. Another key element is rebalancing the emotional power dynamic. During a crisis, women often lose power by over-investing emotionally, over-talking, over-explaining, and over-chasing. Men subconsciously pull away when they feel emotional pursuit. So, regaining emotional balance often requires doing less, not more. Create emotional space by stepping back, focusing on your life, and allowing him to feel your value rather than your anxiety. Space is not a game, it is a psychological reset that allows both partners to breathe. Learning to read the emotional signals of a crisis is crucial. Not every crisis means the relationship is ending. Some crises indicate that the relationship is evolving. Others reveal patterns that need healing. Some crises expose old wounds that must be addressed to create intimacy. When you understand that a crisis is not a threat but an invitation to growth, you stop fearing it and start navigating it with strength. Managing a crisis also requires understanding the difference between emotional honesty and emotional dumping. Emotional honesty is expressing your truth with clarity and respect. Emotional dumping is overwhelming your partner with uncontrolled emotional intensity. Women often think that expressing everything they feel will lead to connection, but it often leads to emotional exhaustion for both sides. Emotional honesty is powerful, emotional dumping is destructive. Another mistake is trying to solve the crisis alone. A relationship crisis involves 2 people, 2 emotional histories, 2 communication styles, and 2 nervous systems. You cannot heal the whole dynamic by yourself. You can influence it, guide it, and stabilize it, but he must also participate. Your role is not to fix him, your role is to create an environment where both of you can communicate and reconnect. Understanding attachment styles is also helpful. Women with anxious attachment tend to panic during crises, fearing abandonment. Women with secure attachment remain grounded and calm. Women with avoidant tendencies try to detach too much. Recognizing your attachment style helps you avoid repeating destructive patterns. If you know you tend to panic, slow down. If you tend to attack when afraid, pause. If you tend to withdraw, stay present. A crisis is a mirror showing your emotional habits. Use this mirror wisely. Men often enter a logical mode during conflict while women stay in emotional mode. This mismatch leads to misunderstanding. The key is learning when to talk from the heart and when to talk from logic. Emotional conversations require safety and calm. Practical conversations require clarity and timing. Mixing the two creates confusion. Learn to say, "Let's take a pause, then talk when we are calmer." This simple sentence is one of the most powerful tools in a relationship crisis. One of the most misunderstood tools in crisis management is emotional detachment. Emotional detachment does not mean you stop loving him. It means you stop letting fear control your reactions. Detachment gives you perspective, allows you to see the situation clearly, and keeps you from reacting impulsively. When you detach emotionally, you regain your power. You respond wisely, not reactively. Men respect women who remain composed during emotional storms. After stabilizing the crisis, you must rebuild emotional connection. Reconnection does not happen through pressure, it happens through warmth, curiosity, and presence. Ask questions that deepen understanding rather than force intimacy. For example, how do you feel when we argue? What do you need in those moments? How can we make this easier for both of us? Questions open doors. Accusations close them. A crisis is also a chance to renegotiate the relationship dynamic. Are you carrying emotional labor alone? Are you suppressing your needs? Are you losing yourself in the relationship? A crisis exposes imbalance. Use that information wisely. A healthy relationship requires equal emotional responsibility. Do not apologize for expressing your needs. Women who silence themselves during crises create resentment that destroys the relationship later. Sometimes the crisis reveals incompatibilities that cannot be ignored. If he refuses to communicate, refuses to take responsibility, or refuses to grow, you must consider whether staying serves your emotional well-being. A crisis is not only about saving the relationship, it is about protecting yourself. Your emotional health matters. A crisis invites you to choose yourself while inviting him to choose you too. Both must choose the relationship for healing to occur. When healing begins, take small steps. Rebuilding trust takes time. Rebuilding emotional safety takes patience. Do not rush the process. Consistency is more important than intensity. Gentle gestures, kind words, shared moments, and calm conversations rebuild connection more effectively than dramatic declarations. In the end, a love crisis is a rite of passage. It shows you the truth about yourself, about him, and about the relationship. It pushes you to grow, to communicate, to set boundaries, and to love more intelligently. Women who learn to navigate crises with emotional strength and clarity not only repair their relationships, they transform them. Part 2. He is pulling away the hidden strategies to save your relationship before it's too late. Love crises often begin quietly. A change in his tone. A shorter message. A growing distance. A hesitation. What starts as a subtle shift can grow into a full emotional storm if not managed wisely. Women feel at first, the intuition that something is wrong. But intuition without understanding leads to confusion, anxiety, and overreactions that sadly intensify the crisis. To manage a love crisis effectively, you need strategies that address the emotional, psychological, and relational layers of the problem. This second part of the script dives deeper into advanced strategies to navigate romantic crises with intelligence, maturity, and true feminine emotional power. One of the first advanced principles is recognizing the male emotional withdrawal cycle. Men withdraw not because they love less, but because they become emotionally overwhelmed. When emotional pressure rises, men instinctively step back to process, regain clarity, and restore their sense of internal stability. Women often interpret this withdrawal as rejection, abandonment, or loss of interest. This misunderstanding creates panic, which leads to chasing behaviors, which in turn cause deeper withdrawal. The cycle becomes a spiral. To interrupt this spiral, you must give emotional space without emotional coldness. Space is not punishment, it is oxygen. Coldness is detachment, space is respect. The way you grant space determines whether he feels safe returning or pushed further away. Communicating your space giving calmly helps. I feel like we both need a little space to think and breathe. I'm here when you're ready to talk. This message holds emotional maturity. It tells him you are not abandoning him, nor suffocating him. You are choosing clarity. Another advanced strategy is managing your emotional presence. Women often bring emotional intensity to crises, and while intensity is not inherently negative, it can destabilize a man who is already overwhelmed. Emotional presence means staying calm, steady, grounded, and self-assured. It means listening instead of over-explaining, observing instead of assuming, and pausing instead of reacting. Emotional presence is powerful because it creates an anchor in the middle of emotional chaos. Men gravitate toward women who embody stability during turbulent times. To cultivate emotional presence, you must work on your internal self-talk. During crises, women often catastrophize, he doesn't love me anymore, everything is falling apart, this is hopeless. These internal narratives fuel anxiety and lead to destructive actions. Replace catastrophizing with grounding statements, this is a challenge, not the end, we're both overwhelmed, not broken, we can understand each other if we calm down. Your internal voice will dictate your external behavior. The next strategy is emotional responsibility, owning your emotions without blaming him for them. Instead of saying you make me feel insecure, say I feel insecure when communication becomes unclear. This subtle shift changes everything. When you blame, he feels attacked and shuts down. When you express responsibility, he feels invited to understand you. Emotional responsibility opens conversation instead of triggering defensive reactions. Understanding his emotional triggers is crucial. Men often react strongly to feeling criticized, controlled, or dismissed. Even neutral phrases can trigger old wounds or insecurities. For example, saying "why don't you ever open up" may sound innocent, but to a man, it can feel like criticism of his emotional abilities. Instead, try, "I want to understand what you feel, and I'm here when you're ready to share." This communicates desire for connection without pressure. Reassurance is another critical tool, but it must be used wisely. Too much reassurance makes you appear anxious and insecure. Too little reassurance makes him feel unappreciated. Use balanced reassurance, "I care about us, I'm committed to understanding you, I want us to grow through this." These statements calm the crisis energy without suffocating him. Next is timing. Women often choose the worst possible moment to discuss emotional issues, right before sleep, during stress, after work, or during conflict. Men cannot process emotional complexity when their nervous system is overloaded. Choose a neutral moment. A calm environment. Emotional timing is half the strategy. A well-timed conversation avoids hours of unnecessary conflict. One advanced technique is emotional mirroring, reflecting his emotional state calmly without absorbing his intensity. If he is frustrated, do not reflect frustration, reflect understanding. If he is silent, do not panic, mirror calmness. If he expresses confusion, Mirror patience. Emotional mirroring helps him regulate himself through your presence. This is one of the most influential feminine emotional skills, because it stabilizes the masculine emotional system without words. Another powerful strategy is narrative reframing. Many crises escalate because each partner creates a negative narrative about the other. Women might think, he doesn't care, he never makes effort, he's distant because he's losing interest. These narratives influence your tone, your energy, and your behavior. Instead, reframe, he is overwhelmed, he needs space to think, he is processing in his own way. A positive narrative calms your nervous system and reduces the crisis intensity. Boundaries remain a vital part of crisis management. A mature woman sets boundaries with calm firmness, not emotional aggression. Boundaries protect your dignity without destroying connection. For example, I'm willing to talk, but not if we're disrespecting each other, or I care about you, but I need emotional clarity before continuing this discussion. Boundaries communicate self-respect and emotional intelligence. One advanced mistake many women make is over-apologizing. Apologies are powerful when genuine, but destructive when excessive. Over-apologizing communicates insecurity, desperation, and emotional imbalance. Apologize only for what is yours, not for his reactions. Self-respect is essential in crises, because a man cannot respect a woman who abandons herself to save the relationship. Another mistake is emotional testing using silence, jealousy, coldness, or manipulation to provoke a reaction. Emotional tests always backfire. They damage trust, confuse communication, and create resentment. Authenticity is more powerful than testing. Say what you feel. Express your needs. Do so with grace. Emotional honesty is the foundation of crisis healing. One of the most transformative strategies is shifting from fear energy to love energy. Crises make women act from fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. Fear energy leads to chasing, clinging, overthinking, and emotional spirals. Love energy leads to calm communication, patience, understanding, and clarity. Before you speak or act, ask yourself, am I acting from fear or from love? This question alone can redirect the entire crisis. You must also reconnect with your feminine energy, not in a superficial way, but in an emotional way. Feminine energy is receptive, intuitive, soft yet powerful, emotionally intelligent, and deeply connected. During crises, women often shift into masculine energy, controlling, pushing, demanding, problem-solving. This creates polarity collapse. In a crisis, return to feminine emotional power, presence, empathy, self-worth, inner calm, emotional depth. Understanding his masculinity is also key. Men in crisis feel stripped of emotional stability. Their masculine energy collapses. You cannot shame, pressure, or control him back into connection. Instead, help restore his emotional safety by being centered. He reconnects when he feels emotionally safe, not emotionally cornered. Another advanced strategy is focusing on the future rather than the past. Women often revisit past mistakes, old arguments, and previous hurts during crises. This overwhelms him and reignites emotional tension. Instead, focus on rebuilding. How can we communicate better? What do you need going forward? How can we make this easier for both of us? Solutions build the future. Blame destroys the present. But crisis management is not only about him, it is about you. You must reconnect with your identity outside the relationship. Women in crisis often lose themselves, stop eating well, stop sleeping, stop socializing, Stop pursuing hobbies. This loss of self amplifies the emotional instability. Reclaiming yourself is essential. When a woman reconnects with her own life, her emotional energy becomes magnetic again. He feels her strength, not her desperation. Self-care during a crisis is not selfish, it is strategic. Emotional, physical, and psychological self-care stabilizes your nervous system. You cannot heal a crisis from a dysregulated emotional state. Sleep, nutrition, movement, breathing, journaling, and grounding exercises make communication clearer and more effective. Another advanced insight: crises reveal emotional compatibility. Pay attention to whether he shows willingness to communicate, grow, or repair. A man who takes responsibility, expresses effort, and shows vulnerability is emotionally available. A man who avoids communication, blames you for everything, or refuses growth is emotionally unavailable. Crisis is not only a test of the relationship, it is a revelation of who he truly is. When the moment for conversation arrives, follow the structure of emotionally intelligent dialogue. First, express your emotions calmly. Second, express your needs clearly. Third, invite him to share. Fourth, ask how you can grow together. This four-step method prevents chaos and promotes understanding. Rebuilding intimacy after a crisis requires emotional reconnection before physical reconnection. Physical intimacy too soon can mask unresolved issues. Emotional intimacy comes from presence, softness, vulnerability, and genuine curiosity. Ask meaningful questions, share feelings, and create safe emotional spaces. Forgiveness is another powerful but misunderstood element. Forgiveness does not mean accepting repeating patterns. Forgiveness means releasing emotional heaviness. You forgive to heal, not to excuse. To move forward, you must let go of resentment while holding on to self-respect. Ending a crisis requires patience, consistency, and emotional maturity. Progress is not linear. Some days will be easy, others challenging. But if you remain grounded, clear, and connected to your feminine power, you create a path toward healing. Ultimately, love crises are opportunities. They show you what must change. They reveal emotional wounds. They challenge you to evolve. Women who learn to navigate crises with intelligence, calm, and emotional strength become unshakable partners. They inspire men to step up, communicate, and grow. A crisis is not the end. It is the beginning of a new emotional chapter, if you choose to handle it with wisdom. Thank you, and see you soon for another video.